Hello, y'all. This is Erica with Blacks in Period Films, the place where we discuss Black characters in period films, series, and historical fiction. I'm here to talk about the new Netflix series, Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, which is inspired by the book written by Walker's great-great-granddaughter, Amelia Bundles, titled On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker. And while watching this, I participated in the watch party that was going on Twitter, and Amelia Bundles was also participating in it, as well as a lot of other great viewers. Some historians were involved, and so it was really fun. We watched and tweeted using the hashtag #SelfMadeNetflix. It was an interesting experience, and I really enjoyed watching along with people, and it kind of reminded me of how it was during the Roots 2016 premiere. There were tons of people watching the same thing and having a great time watching it and tweeting about period films, which is something I love to do. So I had a great time, a social time watching it and talking with other people. I had to talk about the series because I felt a lot of things while watching it. Some good things and some bad things. So I'm going to review it, and I'll start with the good first. So the good. A major part of the period film experience is the costumes and set decorations, and these are absolutely amazing. It isn't very often that we get to see Black characters in Edwardian clothing, which is early 1900 clothing. It came right after the Victorian period, and the story starts in St. Louis in 1908. It ends around 1918. So that's 10 years that are represented in costumes. And with period films, we really should see that transition in time. And we get to see that change in characters through their change in clothing. That's especially important because this is a rags to riches story. And so I love that we can see Walker's growth in her confidence and in her wealth through her clothing. The same is true for the people around her. As her business grew, the characters of her family also became more extravagant. And I really feel like the makeup and hair department did wonderfully with that. And they really captured the look of early 1900s hair, which is they got that height and they got the elegant updos correct. I also think the wigs were really well done because this is natural hair that we're talking about, natural textured hair. And so they got that texture right. It looked very real to me and I really loved it. And that was a major part of the series. And so it was important. It was crucial that the look of it was right and they got it right. It was perfect to me. They perfectly complemented. They were perfectly complemented by the costume and wardrobe department. And there were a few times when I questioned the fitting a bit because there were times when I feel like the costumes were a little looser than they would have been at that time. But for the most part, the costumes were gorgeously inspired. If I looked at them, I'd know right away what period it was based on. The costumes and hair and the lovely hats made me so happy as a historical fashion lover. Part of my experience when watching period films is the look because I'm trying to be transported to a different place and time where they wear different clothing. And so to get that look right adds so much to the experience, the viewing experience. I especially loved how they made her daughter Lilia so fashion for it because the real Lilia was very fashion for it. And so they got that right. I say the same for the sets and locations. They were so realistic to the period. We see some technology from that time, and we also get to see a natural progression in the Walker's rise from rags to riches. At the start, her home is smaller and not extravagant at all, but as her business grows, so do the surrounding luxuries. They look accurate and felt lived in and real. They didn't feel like props. They looked like actual items and homes that people lived in. And that really added to the story. The performances were also awesome. I was especially moved by Kevin Carroll's performance as Walker's lawyer, Freeman Ransom. There are two very touching scenes, and he's great in both of them. He's just such a loyal character. The way he presented himself felt very warm, like you knew him before this series started and you wanted to know him. And I feel like the performances of most of the characters, for the most part, felt natural to the early 1900s. I especially liked how Walker's father-in-law, as the oldest character, talked about slavery. He lived through it as an adult and would naturally have had more memories than the younger characters. Especially since Walker was born in 1867, she would only have experienced the after effects of slavery, and she surely would have heard the stories from older people around her about slavery and what that was like. So, including this character was important to me. This transition as a group from being enslaved to free is something that wouldn't easily be forgotten or isn't easily forgotten. And Garrett Morris did a nice job bringing that element into his character Cleophas. Blair Underwood was also amazing. He looks amazing in period clothing. I want to see him in more historical films. As always, he plays a not so nice character. That's kind of becoming the thing with him, a thing with him. Like people, for the most part, know if you see Blair Underwood that he's not really gonna be playing a sweet, nice character. But every time he plays a character, he does a great job. I was also surprised by Tiffany Haddish. I think she's really developing a nice resume for herself outside of being a comedian. I think she's doing a great job racking up historical films, and I'm really interested in seeing what other time period she's placed in. It'll be interesting to see her in that. Octavia Spencer was born to play Madam C.J. Walker, and I was really happy when she got casted because I felt that she really was close to appearance in Madam C.J. Walker. She also seemed to always be thinking, which I think somebody who is so intelligent and so business-minded that would be a characteristic that they have. They would always be thinking about their next step and the way that they would progress and grow. And that's who she was. She was a business-minded woman who was very concerned with growth to help herself, her family, as well as her community. So I think Octavia Spencer did a wonderful job showing that. I just really want to thank her great-great-granddaughter. She's done such an amazing job. I follow her on Twitter. She's always talking about her great-great-grandmother. She's making sure that there are clarifications on anything about her, and she's just doing an amazing job making sure that people remember Madam C.J. Walker. And without her, so much of the information and so many of the pictures and so many of the things from their family's history would not be known. The costumes, sets, acting were my positives for this series. But as I mentioned earlier, I have some negatives for the series as well. The title Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker is correct because this limited series on Madam C.J. Walker was only inspired by her life. Inspired. It was in no way an overwhelmingly accurate portrayal of what Walker or the people around her experienced. And this really brought the story down for me. Honestly, it really brought it down for me. These inaccuracies paired with the soundtrack, which included modern songs, pulled me out of the story because the music that the characters were listening to was of the time, but the music that was played to add to the story was modern. I especially felt like historically accurate music would have nicely complemented this movie because there were so many amazing Black musicians that were involved in historically Black genres like jazz and ragtime. It would have been awesome to have that music played to complement the story. It took me out having modern music. Additionally, I know that when you bring stories to the screen, creatives often have to add and or take away from the real story. So going into this, I suspected and knew that there'd be characters like Esther and Sweetness who were fake. It's not ideal, but it's slightly understandable. However, the character and villain of the series, Addie Monroe, is a composite character based on a real woman named Annie Malone. This is a real woman whose legacy has been erased with the passing of time. To further erase her story and accomplishments by making her the villain is inexcusable to me. To create such a horrible person and assign this to a historical figure that isn't well known and doesn't have descendants to defend her is too much for me. I really don't understand why this route was taken. And thinking about it, I feel like this portrayal not only disrespects Annie Malone's legacy, but I also feel like it disrespects Madam C.J. Walker's motivations. Because instead of being motivated by her go-getter spirit, her business goals, the desire to take care of her daughter, and her love of beauty culture, her motivations are twisted into being about feeling insecure about her beauty and wanting to beat Monroe to prove herself worthy. And those were not her motivations. She was more motivated by business and a love of hair than she was by trying to prove that she was worthy. It was less about competition and more about self-motivation. So I don't have one set score for this series. I have two. Some people might think I'm taking the easy way out by giving it two scores, but really I understand that there are two different types. Well, not two. There are multiple types of viewers for historical films. So some people are just there for the experience and the pretty dresses, and some people cannot enjoy a period film if it's not historically accurate. So if you don't care about accuracy and you're there for a good time, then the series gets an A. You will be inspired by this intelligent and determined woman's rise. You'll love the costumes. You'll have a really good time. I think you should watch it. You will definitely enjoy it. However, if history is your concern, then Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, definitely would get a D. So the tarnishing of the legacy of an actual businesswoman in Annie Malone is also very disappointing. So my questions for you, because I have some questions. Have you watched it? What did you think? I also have a question about creative liberty. How much creative liberty is too much? I perfectly understand creative liberty is a right of every creative. You have a right to create the story that you want to see. But how much is too much, especially when it involves real people, you know? Do creatives have free range, or is there a line that can be crossed? Tell me what you think down below. Thanks for watching. I want you to stay safe. Check out our social medias and have a great day. Bye.